I welcome you today, and I'm very pleased. This looks like a snow day in terms of turnout. So there's a bunch of people out there, name tags still there, that are going to be showing up. And on behalf of Second Chance, our transplant support group, which you may be not familiar with, but you may have seen some of the things we do. All right, and I'll talk more about that later, but basically this is Jim Bullard. He sometimes comes down from Piscataway to welcome. He's the chairman of Second Chance. We have 4 chapters. Each of the transplant centers has a chapter, so Temple, Hahnemann, Jefferson, and Huff. And each one does a little bit different these days, adapting to today's environment. And so as president of Second Chance Huff chapter, I welcome you. And for those who have had a heart transplant, and whether you're out that milestone 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years or more, congratulations. But for right now, I just want to introduce Derek. And without taking his story away, Derek, why don't you read that quote, because that's your quote.
Sure. Great things can happen if you forget about the mountain they have to climb, and you just focused on the very next step.
Now, in the flyer that you got pretty much his story, but I thought a picture or two would help. And I know my main inspiration when I first heard about him, or knew him, was when they had their baby afterwards, and again, that's part of the story. So with that, you're on.
Thanks, Jim. Can you guys hear me okay? And thank you all for coming. Hey, Maria. And as far as I'm concerned, I am Derek. I was transplanted here at Penn, and I was transplanted 4 years, 10 months, 9 days, and 23 hours ago. But who's counting? And yes, as Jim said, and as the title slide said, I am an Ironman triathlete. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ironman, I was not until I started doing them. It is a 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike ride, followed by a 26.2 mile run. And I just finished my 4th in October. Now, it's an amazing thing to go through, but what I don't want to mislead you with the idea is looking at me now. God, he's gorgeous. No, no, but seriously, I was not athletic prior to my heart transplant. And so basically, I started off as probably many of you. I wasn't focused on athletics. Maybe you are. Maybe it was just me. I'll speak for myself. Basically, I was focused on work. I was working for this company. I was working crazy hours, and when I would go home from working a long day, I would stop off at Mickey D's through the drive-thru. I'd take that all the way home. I'd munch as I was driving. I'd come home. I'd drive into my garage. I'd close the door. I'd sit on the sofa, and I'd pop open my laptop, and I'd continue to work throughout the night. And then I'd get up the next morning and I'd do it again. Exercise did not enter into the equation. Physical fitness, activity did not enter into the equation. I was focused on a career. So 30 years old, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was 200 pounds. The last time I had been physically active was high school. So, put that into perspective. I hadn't seen a treadmill. I played soccer growing up, but those were well over a decade and a half away from when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so, I'm having these issues with anemia and hemorrhaging. And my doctors, the relentless doctors and good doctors that they were not here at Penn, but they managed to stick every probe down me and up me that they possibly could. And they couldn't find anything for 3 months. But they saw one little shadow on one of the tests, on one of the scans. They said, we don't think it's anything. I mean, we'd like to ask if you'd mind us opening you up, do a little exploration into your stomach. I'm like, okay. I'm like, hopefully we can figure out why you're bleeding. You know, hopefully we can find out why you're anemic and you're not feeling well. And they put me under. They open up a little incision, and next thing you know, I'm still on the operating table, and they bring me up. I still can't feel a thing, and I'm high as a kite, but I had this doctor's face leaning down over mine, and they say, Mr. Fitzgerald, we're sorry to say this, we found something we weren't expecting to find. We found a tumor, and we need to take it out right now. Do you give us consent? And I was like, sure, have at it. What do I care? Take what you want. But you know, like I said, I was pretty out of it at the time. Next thing you know, I'm waking up in recovery, and a team of doctors and my family are now surrounding my bed, and they've all got solemn faces, and they say, we're sorry to tell you this, but we took a tumor the size of a grapefruit out of your intestines. We were not expecting to find that. We had it biopsied, and it is cancerous. You have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So what we're going to do is put you through, physical rehabilitation. So, I mean, because they severed my abdominals, so basically they cut me from here to just below my belt line, and they took out 2 feet of intestine on either side. They sewed me back up. They said, listen, we're going to put you through chemotherapy just as a precautionary measure. You know, hopefully we got everything, but you've got to learn to walk again before, you know, we can push you through chemotherapy. We got to get you strong enough to handle it. So I went through chemotherapy in 2003, from late 2003 to 2004. And basically, I go in for the first day of chemotherapy, and the doctor says, Derek, do you understand what chemotherapy is? Do you understand the basics of what we're going to do here? And I said, I've got an idea, right? I'm going to put drugs in a bag and drip it into me and try and, you know, get rid of the cancer. He's like, all right, let me put it for you this way. Picture an airplane flying high in the sky. I'm like, oh, that's nice, okay. He said, all right, now picture that airplane's on fire. I said, okay. He said, that fire is your cancer, and with this chemotherapy regimen is what we're going to do is we're flooding your body with toxins, and we're going to put that plane into a medically controlled nosedive, and we're going to send you hurtling towards the earth. And it's my job, Derek, as your oncologist, to be the pilot of that plane and to know when to pull back on that stick, and hopefully the sheer velocity of you hurtling towards the earth will put out the flames. And then I'll be there to pull you out of that nosedive just before you hit the ground, and I'll take you back up to a cruising altitude, and we'll dust you off, and we'll check you out, and we'll see if there's any cancer left. And if there is, we'll do it again, and we'll do it again, until we've found no more cancer, or your body can no longer take the regimen. So I was very thankful that after 5 months of treatment, my doctors gave me the clean bill of health. They said, you're in remission, you know, you're in technical remission. So congratulations. So, you know, my wife and I kind of look at each other, we take that deep sigh of relief of dodging a bullet, and we say, yeah, let's get our life on track again. Let's do this. So 3 months after my chemotherapy, I was back at work, and I'm walking from my car, where I park in the parking lot, up this hill to my office building. And I get halfway up, and I've been doing this walk hundreds, if not thousands of times to this point. But 3 months after my surgery, and after 3 months after my chemotherapy, and I'm declared in remission, I get halfway up this hill and I stop, and I'm breathing heavy. And for those of us who have gone through heart failure, I always said it was like hanging two 10-pound weights from my lungs, and, it wasn't that big a deal at first. I just kind of adjusted to it and I kept moving on. But basically, I started going to I started having these late night trips to the ER. And first they say, well, you've got pneumonia, and they would treat me for pneumonia. And I'm breathing and it sounds like popcorn popping, or the saliva suction tube at the dentist's office is just gurgling. And so they say, oh, maybe it's not pneumonia, maybe you have pleurisy. You've got fluid buildup in your lungs. And they treat me for pleurisy, and that didn't do it. So December of 2004, actually, I'm sorry, not December of 2004, but earlier in 2004, I'm in for one of my late night routine visits into the ER when I'm having some kind of episode, and I don't know what it is at the time, in my bed. And my wife and I are in the ER, and this new doctor starts checking me out. He starts doing things like EKGs and echocardiograms, and I had no clue at the time, what was going on. But after a series of tests, he comes to my bedside, and great guy, extremely compassionate, the kind of doctor you want there by your side when you're going to get bad news. And the guy sits down and he's like, Derek, I know you've had a rough year, with the cancer treatment, but I'm afraid I've got more bad news for you. You've got heart failure. And then he explained ejection fractions to me. Is there anybody here that doesn't know ejection fractions or EF at this point? I think from the introductions, I think we all do. At that time, he told me that my EF was 18%. And he said, you know what, it's kind of a subjective perspective at this point, but you're right on the cusp of needing to be on the heart transplant waiting list. And that was mid-2004. His prescription for me at that point was medication and diet and exercise. And so I would try my hardest to exercise. Quite honestly, I still ate like crap. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. And quite honestly, once I'd gone through the cancer process, I was 200 pounds when I went into chemotherapy. And because of the tumors that had grown in my throat, they itched so badly. The only way I could scratch them was actually pass food across them and scratch on the way down. So I gained weight going through my cancer treatment. And so those habits really didn't change that much once I was diagnosed with heart failure. I tried, but I didn't. Knowing what I know now, and looking back at myself back then, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't do a good job of it. I tried my best to exercise, but I was struggling, and so the way I described it to my doctors, I'll tell you guys, and maybe you can relate. I told them it was like being like in the 12th round of a heavyweight fight, and the guy I'm boxing just knocked me out, but I'm still on my feet. I'm knocked out, but I don't know it yet. And so I think about Rocky, and I think about all those fights, and he's just kind of staggering around. And I would have these episodes when it first started, maybe 30 seconds at a time, where my hands would fall to my sides, my head would go heavy, and the world would start spinning, and I would find a chair or any surface, and I would sit down, and I'd be breathing a little heavier. And that was the beginning of it. And every day it got a little worse, and it got a little worse, and it got a little worse. I went for 7 years with my heart failure. And so by, August of 2010, I was pretty bad. I had a pacemaker defibrillator implanted at the end of 2004 because my heart I was still going through arrhythmias, dangerous arrhythmias. So by August 2010, I go in to see my doctor, my cardiologist, for my regularly scheduled appointment, and he sits me down. He's like, Derek, I'm sorry to tell you this, but The meds that we were hoping to bring your ejection fraction up to maybe 30, 40%, they're not doing it. You know, you're still hovering around 18%. You're not getting any better. In fact, it looks now like you're taking a dip for the worse. It's time to put you on the heart transplant waiting list. So I shopped around and landed here at Penn, and I immediately felt comfortable. I came in, I met the team, I saw the facility, and I felt confident that it was the best shot that I had of survival. So that was August of 2010. I get on the heart transplant waiting list. I go through my compatibility testing, and so we hit Thanksgiving, coming up quickly, of 2010. And so, you know, I've been keeping my head shaved since I had cancer. I'm 42 years old. At the time I was 38, 37 years old. And I didn't want to go through the awkward phase again with that is it long hair or short hair? Anyway, I've been keeping it shaved since I went through cancer. And so it's a funny thing for little kids, you know, at the Thanksgiving table, like, oh, Derek, Uncle Derek or Cousin Derek or, you know, whoever it was, you know, they would be sneezing into their hands, you know, rubbing their armpits, playing in dirt. They're like, oh, let's rub Derek's head. Oh, it's hilarious, he's bald. And so, so needless to say, I come out of Thanksgiving with a cold. And the cold turns into pneumonia very quickly. But I'm stubborn. You know, I was working with Penn at the time, and they were taking care of me, and my cardiologist was taking care of me. But I get a cold, and I just felt crummy all the time. So when I actually got pneumonia, I really couldn't tell the difference. But my wife, who's been with me since high school, she looks at me like she does because I'm stubborn, and she's like, really? Really? Go to the doctor. So I go to the doctor, and I go in for they give me the Z-Pack or whatever it was, and I go through pneumonia treatment. I'm feeling mildly better. I go for 2 weeks after that, and it's just before Christmas of 2010. And as I'm walking out of getting my scans, I'm not even back to my car yet. So I'm still, you know, at the doctor's office. And the technicians who took my x-rays of my lungs call me on my cell phone. They say, Mr. Fitzgerald, these are the technicians. You know, we just took your lung x-rays. We're not actually supposed to call you until we've spoken with our consulting physician, but we got to ask you right now, do you have a cardiologist? If you don't, you need to get to the ER right now. It looks like you're having some kind of cardiac event right now. And it just so happened that I had my regularly 4-month scheduled appointment with my regular cardiologist the very next day. I looked at my wife, and I'm kind of trudging around as I was at the time. And I look at her, and I tell her what's going on. And she's like, well, let's go. And I was like, listen, by now, my medical history is volumes thick. Nothing against the ER, but I don't want to sit through another session of an ER doctor trying to get up to speed on my medical history to treat me. So I'll wait it out. My cardiologist knows me. He knows everything that I've gone through. I'll wait it out. I'll see him tomorrow. And if it gets bad, take me to the ER. So we waited a night, and my wife gave me the evil stink eye all night. Are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. So we go through a night, pretty much sleepless. And I go to my appointment with my cardiologist the next day. I walk into the waiting room, I sit down, and everything's cool. I mean, status quo. And the nurse calls me back to the examination room. She sits me down on the table and takes my vitals. She sits me down and she takes my vitals, and she goes, huh, your resting heart rate's pretty low. Are you an athlete? And I was like, no, I'm an heart failure. But it was kind of funny at the time, ironic. Anyway, she leaves the room. She goes to get the doctor. The door closes, and I collapse. And so my wife was in the room with me, and she's got her hands underneath my armpits behind me, trying to keep me from falling over. And then the door opens, my cardiologist sees me. And, he's there, he helps my wife get me back on the table. He gets the blood pressure cuff, puts it on one arm, can't get a reading. Puts it up, my head's, flapping around. I was out. And he puts the blood pressure cuff on the other arm, just in case there was something wrong with one arm. He couldn't get a blood pressure reading on the other arm either. He's like, that's it. You're going to the hospital now. Call a helicopter, call an ambulance. You're going to the hospital. That's it. And so they carted me off. They sent me here. When I came in, I think my ejection fraction at the time had gone down from 15 to 10%. I was no longer able to lie down because my lungs would fill up with fluid. My heart wasn't strong enough to pump the fluid out. So they had me propped up on pillows. They put me on Melronone, and I'm waiting for a heart transplant. It was January 27th, I believe, of 2010. And in the following days, my ejection fraction managed to go down to 5%. And I would just lay there, propped up in bed. My friends and my family, they would come and visit me, as I'm sure that your friends and family did you when you were waiting for your heart transplant. When I told you, when I originally started with heart failure, I would have 30 seconds a day of, a little bit of disorientation, dizziness, and fatigue. That was 98% of my day by the time we got to end of 2010. I'd be in bed, my chin would be to my chest, my arms would be at my side. I couldn't move. And like I said, my friends and family would come visit me, and I could kind of tell that they were there. I couldn't really respond. They would hold my hand and they would cry. And that was the deal. For those few moments of the day when I was actually awake and able to move, the doctors and the nurses would come to my bedside and they'd say, Derek, you got to get up. Your heart ain't here yet. You got to get moving. So, I would go out in the hallway outside my hospital room, and I would walk 20 feet, lean up against the side of the wall. I said, that's it. I'm done. I can't do this. So when the transplant coordinator walks into my room on January 3rd, 2011, she's crying. And she says, Derek, we think we found your heart. You want to do this? And at some point, like many of you, I'm sure, when you're facing that first heart transplant, man, you're hoping for some kind of miracle to take place. You don't want to swap out the engine mid-flight, right? So I was petrified. I didn't get the opportunity to speak to any other heart transplant recipients before I came in the door. And by the time I came in the door, I was in bad shape. So quite honestly, I thought that I was looking forward to a very sedentary lifestyle, catching up on all the daytime courtroom dramas. And I really didn't know how I felt about that, but I knew I wanted to live. And so I said, yeah, I knew, I told the transplant coordinator that I knew it was my only shot. I knew it was my last shot. And then we needed to do this. So January 3rd, they put me in a transplant. I wake up the next day, and I look at my wife, and I could tell from looking at her that I had received the heart. And I knew that it was this momentous, miraculous thing that happened, and I wanted to find a way to get back. But at the same time, I'd been hit by a truck, from medical procedures. And so the great thing is that I had color again. I could hear a heartbeat, where I'd forgotten what a heartbeat had sounded or felt like. The very next day, the team here had me up and walking with a walker. And that was the cool thing about it, is that prior to the transplant, I couldn't walk 20 feet. The very next day after getting the transplant, I was in a walker, doing laps around my hospital floor. And I knew that I had to do something to honor this person that had chosen the last day of their life to save the life of a complete stranger. So I didn't know what that was going to be yet. So I took my rehabilitation very seriously. Maria came in and gives me the 3-ring binder and a bag of drugs. And my eyes rolled back in the back of my head. I'm like, holy crap. She's like, this is what it's going to be like to live for the rest of your life. Learn the meds. I'm telling you a lot now, but it'll become secondhand, and you'll know what they all are, and you'll know your meds, and you'll know your dosages. And so there's 40 plus medications a day, high dosages, out the wazoo. I'm shaking, everywhere I go with all, the cell set and the tack. But I made it out of here 7 days after heart transplant. I go home. I really wanted to be home in my own bed. Penn's great, but I like being home. And so that first month of January, I wasn't strong enough to lift my head off of a pillow. I had begun to atrophy leading into the heart transplant. I had gone from 200 pounds when I was diagnosed with cancer down to, I think, 155 pounds at transplant. Of course, I had diabetes induced, or it was transplant-induced diabetes coming out of the transplant. And I knew I had to get that in check. It was all very important to me to get all of that under control. So, if someone came to my bedside and picked me up out of bed and got me to my feet, I would walk. When no one was there, I would use my atrophied butt muscles to wiggle myself off the side of the bed, fall to the floor, sorry Maria, and I would crawl to the first vertical surface, a wall, in my bedroom. And that's how I started training for my first 5K. I would hit the wall, I would push myself up the wall, I would stagger to my feet, and I would do laps in my bedroom, shuffling from one side of the bedroom to the other, and working, the swollen feet from the bypass, trying to get the water out of me, walking on top of what I thought looked like 2 footballs inflated at the bottom of my ankles. You know that one? Yeah. So that's how it all started. I go to cardiac rehab, and I went out in the burbs, and everybody there had some kind of cardiac procedure, but I was the one transplant. And I was a young guy too, relatively to the rest of the group. And I knew that because every time I would do a lap around the treadmills where all the other folks were doing their exercises, I'd hear the whispers, "That's the transplant." And so cardiac rehab literally took me from the shuffle, the shuffle, you're trying to get through everything, and then to a bit of a walk, from a walk to an extremely slow jog. In the endurance community, they have something called interval training, where you walk for a few minutes, you run for less. You walk for a few minutes, you run for less. And then slowly, gradually over time, you increase that. You increase the run and decrease the walk. I would walk for 9 minutes and 50 seconds, and I would jog, and that's a generous term at the time, I would jog for 10 seconds. Yes! That's it! 10 seconds, and then I would walk for another 9 minutes, and then I'd jog for 10 seconds. And gradually, over time, I would increase that 10 seconds. And so by the end of cardiac rehab, I'm on the treadmill, and I'm jogging, I'm feeling good. And I'd never jogged more than 30 seconds at a time. And I'm booked up to all the telemetry. You know, my nurse, technician, he was standing right at the front of the treadmill watching me, monitoring me. And I'm jogging, I get to about 30 seconds. I'm like, it's pretty cool. And I'm starting to feel something, but I don't know what it was. Didn't know what it was at the time. And I say, Kurt, do you mind if I go another 30 seconds? Try for it? You know, maybe pick up the pace a little bit? He's like, all right, don't go crazy, but I think you can handle it. Give it a shot. So I jog for another 30 seconds. And I pick up the pace. And while I'm jogging that second 30 seconds, he has to go work with somebody else, and he turns his back towards me. And I'm really starting to feel something. I don't know what it is. And I didn't want to stop jogging. And so while his back was turned, because I was afraid he was going to tell me to stop, I picked up the pace again, and I started jogging. And all of a sudden, this hunched over jog kind of straightens up. My back straightens. And my shoulders pull back. And I get goosebumps all over my arms. And I get goosebumps, the hairs on the back of my neck, they all stand up. And with that, my feet get light on the treadmill. And for a brief glimpse, I get a runner's high. And with that runner's high floods all these memories of what it felt like to be healthy and to feel healthy. Things I had forgotten for years. And I knew that I had a responsibility to honor the person that gave me this heart, to remember them in a way that was me truly living a life that they could be proud of. And if you've seen the Penn Medicine commercials, you know, that I've done, I like to say that I live like my donors watching. It's something that I heard at the Transplant Games back in 2012, I think. And it's been kind of my mantra since then. Live like my donors watching. So I was like, you know what, this is it. So, you know, I'm on the treadmill daily. I kick the diabetes just through exercise. And 8 months out, I compete in my very first 5K race. Now, I'd heard about 5Ks before. My friends had done them. I thought it was some weird cult. I didn't understand what they were all about. And I competed in it, and I felt amazing. That was 8 months post-heart transplant. 10 months post-heart transplant, I signed up with Team in Training. I decided to give back. I did my first half marathon in November of 2011. But I knew that wasn't going to be enough. And so I signed up with the triathlon team, with Team in Training. And in January of 2012, I learned to swim and I learned to bike. And they taught me how to do a triathlon. The first one I did was in April of 2012. And I went down to Florida and I swam in the Gulf. And I did my first Olympic distance triathlon, which is roughly 31 total miles of exercise. And it was great. And, you know, it was something that was brought to my attention. I don't know if you guys belong to Facebook, or if you're members on Facebook and you subscribe to any of these heart transplant communities for support. And I got a lot of positive feedback for what I was doing. But every now and again I'd get somebody say, yeah, but aren't you risking your heart? Aren't you risking the gift? And at the times that I got the opportunity to respond, I would tell them that my transplant team, in the week following my procedure, sat me down and told me some pretty important advice that I took to heart, no pun intended. And they said, listen, you've been given this incredible gift. Now, you could take this gift and seal yourself up in a plastic bubble in an effort to protect what you've been given. But that's not life. That's not living. It's your job to see whatever that life means to you, so go out and live it. And so that's what I've been doing. And so, as the quote said earlier, you know, I started from nothing. We all start, you know, below sea level. And you try and get a little bit better than you were the day before. And then the next day you try to get a little bit better than the day you were before. And after a while, those things add up. And you know, you stop looking at the mountain. You just focus on the very next step that you have to do. And if you just keep trying to do better, a little bit better, than the day you were before, and you celebrate every one of those victories along the way, pretty soon you look in the rear view and you realize that you've already crossed the mountain. It's been an amazing experience. July of 2013, I took all these experiences and I did my first Ironman Triathlon, and I completed the 140.6 total miles. And then later on that year in November, I did my second full Ironman Triathlon. And I did it with 4 other heart transplant recipients from all over the country. And we created a team, we called ourselves the Tin Men. And it's been amazing. I competed in the Transplant Games in 2012 and again in 2014. And I got a chance to meet all these amazing people, and everyone has their own unique and amazing story. I'd been training for the Ironman, so I signed up for all these swim events with the Transplant Games. But I'd never even been to a swim meet before. Never been to one, never saw one on television, never watched the Olympics, you know, swim meets. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I figured when I signed up for all the events, it was months ahead of time. So I thought I'd have time to like Google what individual medley meant, or you know, all these different strokes. It's like, I can swim now. I should be able to do it. I was completely ignorant. And so literally my wife was Googling what these things were as I was walking down to the edge of the pool to jump in to swim. And I turned to somebody from the Southern California team who was in the next lane, and she's Anna Stenzel. And I said, "You look like you know what you're doing." She said, "I've done this before." And I said, "Do you mind if I just cheat off you in the pool? If I just, you know, look at what you're doing and just copy off of you?" And she looks at me, and I'm in swim trunks, so she can see my scar. She's like, "You're a heart transplant, right?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, she puts her hand on my chest. She goes, "Just follow your heart." You know what? And I thought about it later. It sounded like really genuine advice, but I think she just didn't want me to cheat off of her, and she wanted to win the race. She taught me nothing about the strokes that I was about to jump in the pool to do. But it was very sweet. She still kicked my butt. But like I may have said earlier, I've now completed 4 full Ironman distance triathlons. The transplant team here looks at my heart now. I no longer get biopsies, but the last biopsies that they were doing on me, they would look and say, "Listen, if we didn't see the scar on your chest, we wouldn't know that you were a transplant." The nerve regeneration that they told me could take 5 years, if it were to happen at all, started happening within the first year, which, you know, the guess is that that's attributed to my level of physical activity. The 40 plus medications that I started with once I was transplanted are now down to 11 meds a day. I take 2 in the morning, I take 9 at night. They're extremely low dosages. My quality of life is just skyrocketed. These people didn't return me to where I was. They amped up the juice. I now have a life that I could have never dreamed of. Not where I was, but so far beyond that. And as the picture showed, you know, I now have a little girl. She is the most important thing in my life, the most important person in my life. And my wife and I have been together since high school. We've been trying for a good 12 years, unsuccessfully to have children. And, almost 2 years and 9 months ago, my wife hops, on top of me in bed, giddy, holding a little stick, saying, does this look like what it looks like to me? A little plus sign. And so I received the gift of life. But without my gift of life, there would never be this little girl running around calling me daddy. Very quickly, I'll wrap up with this thing that I just did. And my fourth full Ironman was actually in Hawaii, in Kona. And that's a special Ironman because it's the World Championship of Ironman. To date, there's been no other cancer-surviving heart transplant to ever finish a full Ironman. And I'm hoping that changes. NBC broadcasts the Hawaii Ironman every year. It comes on around this time. They take 200 hours of multiple cameras of interviews and race footage, and they boil it down to 90 minutes. And they feature the pros who finish these races in 9 hours. And then the inspirational age groupers, a couple of them, get their stories featured. And I was one of those people. I was up in New York. I got a chance to see it. If you're around a TV tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 in the afternoon, check out NBC. It's a good advertisement for organ donation. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful to be anywhere. But I'm so thankful that I got the opportunity to do it. And for me, it's not about me being, on the broadcast. It's about the message being on the broadcast and getting out there to people to talk about the importance of organ donation, what we all have experienced, and what so many more people should be experiencing. With that, I thank you for your time, and good luck. Keep going.
I think the most important part of that message, Derek, is exactly what you described, starting so small. After my heart transplant 21 years ago, I got a recumbent bike, an expensive one, okay? And for 20 years I watched it, and it hasn't made much of a difference. It's still in my office, it's right there, I can watch things as I use it. I just recently started, okay? 30 seconds. I'm up to 6 minutes. And
That's great.
And so you just inspired me. I'm going to keep going. I can't imagine I'm sorry, ever looking like that again, like I ever did, right? But I think that's what we're here for, right? That inspiration to realize. And everybody's got their own story. And I got to tell you, as I listen to you, there's an awful lot of those pieces of his story that are your story too. You could have said the same thing. When you put it all together in one package, with what you have, it's really amazing. And thank you for that inspiration. Open up for questions, and what I'm going to try and do is repeat your questions so everybody gets a clear hearing, and also it's on our video. So does anybody have any questions? I have a couple, but let's start out here. Anybody? Yes, Pat?
I just want to say, Derek, you look amazing for everything that you've been through.
Thank you.
You are blessed.
Thanks. I am. Thank you.
Bob? No. Oh, okay. Question up here.
Yeah, Derek, did you say you're on broadcast Sunday? At
Saturday.
10 o'clock, or, I mean, 1 o'clock?
1:30 on NBC.
So
Tomorrow.
I have to not watch football.
It's not going to interfere with football unless you're watching college ball, right? So
I was trying to be jokeful there.
not interfering with football, no. And somewhere within the 8 o'clock hour tomorrow morning, I'll be on the Today Show talking about the broadcasts on NBC tomorrow.
John?
Derek, I do have a second question, but the first question is, I wonder, I don't think you explained it in your presentation yet. Could you explain that picture there?
This one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that, right? I started off this past July, in June, sorry. Thanks, John. I started off in June on the shores of the Pacific in Santa Monica. And I dipped my rear wheel of my bicycle into the Pacific, and then I took the following 44 days to ride 3,400 miles to Avalon, New Jersey, to dip my front wheel into the Atlantic. And I got a chance to see the country in a way that not many people do. Bob Goodman was out there with me, and he rode the last leg.
There you go.
See, there you go. As we made it to the shores of Avalon, and it was one of those things that will stay with me forever. It's not just surviving; it's about truly living with what we've gone through.
Up front.
Derek, I had heard some of your story before, and up until today, I thought that you were entering into a heart transplant in a more better physical condition than what I heard today. And well, I'm glad to see you here.
Thank you. And it's interesting. I mean, when I had Bob, you're with, I curse a lot, so I'm trying to clean myself up. But I had a ton of ailments, right, that I used as excuses when I started. The dosages of prednisone and steroids that I was on when I was going through chemotherapy were extremely high, and they damaged my knees and my hips, among all the other damage, right? So it hurt to walk. A lot of times through chemotherapy, I was just doing an army crawl, trying to get to the bathroom because I couldn't hold my own weight. Being cut from here to here, and then later on from here to here, I've had every core muscle, right? You talk about your core in exercise. I've had everything severed, and it became rigid and inflexible, and it made everything that I'm doing now next to impossible. And it really was a painstakingly slow process. But once you build that foundation, all the muscles started coordinating with each other, and now I'm in the best shape of my life.
Yes, Pat.
Do you have any contact with the donor's family?
Nothing other than a letter that I wrote 6 months out that I know was received by my donor family. They've chosen not to respond. I respect that.
Okay,
I wish I knew who they were,
yeah.
but I get it.
That was
Do
the
you
next
think they
topic.
know that you do this stuff in honor of that person?
I wasn't doing any of this when I wrote the letter.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know.
If they know who you are, I wonder if they
They wouldn't
know.
know that.
No?
It's an anonymous process, so in that letter writing, which I hope you all have done,
Right,
anything that's identifiable gets taken out.
right,
On the other side, coming back the same way. So when you see these interviews on Oprah and so forth, about 5% of recipients ever get to a point where both sides have said to the OPO, the Organ Procurement
Right.
Organization, or the program here, we'd like to meet.
right,
And that's usually orchestrated in such a way that it protects everybody.
Right.
So outside of that, it's an anonymous process. So
Yeah.
they're watching commercials, they don't know it's him. But
right,
they're probably looking at it and saying, geez, I hope our heart recipients like that.
right.
And the great thing about the transplant games is that I've met a lot of donor families. And a lot of them have pulled me aside and said, we know you don't know your donor family, but we'll adopt you.
Right.
And it's so sweet, and it means the world to me.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, that was my question. Do you know anything about your donor as to whether he was athletic or not? So much for that question. Janice?
What kind of training do you do besides swimming and biking and running?
Aside from that, I have a strength coach who's been phenomenal with me. Like I said, when you have all these muscle breakdowns, when everything's been cut and broken and severed, it takes a lot to get everything back up and functional
So
again.
weightlifting?
There's some weightlifting, but not weightlifting for the purpose of building, big strong muscles. It's about muscle communication, and getting everything to work fluidly and in concert with each other so that I can run faster and bike faster and swim faster. Yes, there's, there's some muscle benefit. I mean, come on, no. Seriously. But no, the end result is not to beef up. It's to be active and flexible and able to do, able to put my body through all the torture that I put myself through. And at the end of the day, I hate exercise. I hate it. I hate running, I hate biking, I hate swimming, I hate lifting weights. I love how I feel after I do it all. I love it. And so therefore I go back and I do it again. And so my quality of life, I've never felt this good, ever. When I was in high school and active, nope, I was not in this good condition. I have to remind myself that I have gone through a heart transplant. And I remember it every now and again when I sit up too quickly from the chair and the world goes a little wonky because my heart rate does tend to stay a little low. But that's just from the physical conditioning. What I tell people is that the transplant teams, and I give them all the credit in the world that they deserve, the transplant teams can perform miracles in putting other people's organs in our bodies and saving our lives. But once our life is saved, it's up to us to decide what we want to do with that life. And it's up to us. They've opened the door a crack. It's up to us to put our foot in the door and then wedge our whole body through and then just shove the whole friggin' door open. It's up to us.
So that picture behind you matches what you just said.
Yeah.
Yes, question.
I wanted to know what your diet is like. When I received my transplant, I was about 93 pounds. So they said, just go home and eat. Well, now I need to lose about 20. So I looked at the meal preps and things like that, and I need to get around about some kind of diet, if you understand, that I can continue throughout.
Sure. I've certainly sat down with some very good nutritionists here, and they were able to recommend a diet for me. It wasn't until I actually went through and determined what my actual dietary needs were based upon my physical activity, and that's the balance. It's not just your diet; it's diet and exercise. That's the magic combination, and compliance with your meds. For me, it's going to sound a little crazy, but I eat on average a total caloric intake daily of 5,000 calories. All right, that's, they recommend what, 1,100 to 2,000 depending on where you are. I'm at 5,000. I'm burning a lot of calories every day.
I think, because, I exercise, and that's the other thing. I exercise every day, but I'm not seeing it, and I'm guessing that it's my food.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
What kind of things do you eat now, contrast to what you described earlier?
Proteins, carbs before races.
From day to day.
Day to day. I get up in the morning, I have a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios. I have a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and some cheese crackers. And for dinner I'm eating fish and chicken baked. I've cut out all soda. I drink water and not much else, other than smoothies. Smoothies, in consuming 5,000 calories a day, it's actually difficult to work your jaw muscles that much, to chew that much food in a day. So I've condensed everything into smoothies of fruits and veggies and all those things that are great for you, that give you the energy to do what you need to do throughout your day.
John?
Derek, what's your exercise training plan like? And I guess a corollary to that is if somebody who is somewhat out of shape is training to do a virtual triathlon at the wonderful event called the Transplant Games, what would you recommend?
Well, first, don't try and do what I do and put yourself up to it. I get up around 4 in the morning. And it's funny. 4 in the morning means something to me. 4 in the morning was when the phlebotomist rounds would come here in the hospital. And they'd turn on the light and wake me up. Like, what are you doing? Just take my blood. It's symbolic to me because now I wake up at 4 in the morning and I strap on running shoes and I'll go for a run or a bike or a swim. I'll usually hit the pool around 5 in the morning. I'll get, depending on what I'm doing that day, I'll do 3 hours, 4 hours each morning starting at 4 a.m. And then on the weekends in peak Ironman training season, I'm doing a 3-hour to 5-hour run. I might be doing 8 hours on the bike. And so really building up the mileage. But, really for the virtual triathlon, I mean, it's getting ready for the 5K. It's getting out there and getting active and getting moving. Being comfortable, if you're not comfortable running yet, it's the run walk. It's the interval training. And only your own body is going to be able to tell you where your thresholds are. Maybe you can run for, 3.1 miles, and then you can walk it off. I couldn't do that when I started. I, walked for 2 minutes, and I would run for a minute. And I would walk for another 2 minutes, and then I'd run for a minute. Now I run for 13 miles, and I walk for 60 seconds, and I'll run for 13 miles. So, like I said, you find out where you are, and every day you go out there, you just try and be a little bit better than the day you were before, and it builds.
Derek, it gets difficult, like when the weather changes.
Sure.
The seasons to go out early in the morning. I'm a lot like you were. I love to exercise. I've been there, done that. But somehow I got away from it again, and I keep using. My gym is about a half an hour away from me, and I keep using that as an excuse.
Sure.
So I'm kind of like, okay, what else do I do? It's too dark for the park.
Yeah. One of the things that I've really benefited from is actually the social aspect of exercise. First thing I did was I joined Team in Training. I'm not here to advertise Team in Training, but that's just where there's plenty of groups out there if Team in Training is not your thing. But what they did is I would go out on a weekend, I'd meet 12 to 30 people that are all out there exercising. And then you all become Facebook friends, or you call each other on the phone and you go, hey, I'm training for this distance. We're kind of the same pace. Do you want to meet up? Maybe after work. And then after work turns into, well, I need to get a few miles in before work. And so now I have a girl that actually moved in with my wife and I, who was a training partner. We'd be constantly doing 5 a.m. swimming and running, at the Y. But after a while, I put a treadmill in my house, and who wants to drive out to the Y at 5 in the morning? So we put a treadmill in, and now she lives in my house. She rents space in my house, and we go down in the basement, 5 a.m., and I'll hop on my bike. I put it on they call it a trainer, so basically you put the bike in a set of wheels and you can just spin in place. And we do that for a few hours every morning. So it's finding the connections within your community of people who are doing the same things, and then saying, hey, you have a treadmill, let's start the day at your place, and we'll get a workout in. And you're laughing, you're having a good time. Especially in the winter months, you can put a TV in front of you and just pass the time, and then talk and have a great time.
I hear you talk very passionately about running. When I was a kid, I used to love to run, and when I think about it, I was pretty quick, but I have not run in I don't even most of my life. And hearing you talk about, you walk a few, then run, it's giving me the desire to want to go out and do it, because I would love to be able to just run, just take off and run.
Yeah.
So you've given me, at least you've given me something positive. Just,
Well-
and you said, start out small. I'm such a big, I want to be there and over with it.
Get out of your head.
I'm in a hurry type person, so
Celebrate all those little victories. That's extremely important. Hey, I went for 35 seconds today during my interval. You know, I ran for 35 seconds as opposed to 30 seconds yesterday. That feels good. You know what? Let's celebrate. You know, let's you know, grab the friends, grab the spouse, and enjoy it and treat it for what it really is. It's a true victory that you're here at all, and now you're increasing your cardiac output and doing something that you couldn't do the day before. So it's a building process. Forget about where you were and enjoy where you are, and then tomorrow try and be a little bit beyond that.
Now, I have to add a word of caution, okay? Take the bits and pieces that apply to you. I would not recommend that you go home to your husband and say, I want to bring this guy in with us. And he's a trainer, okay?
Call me, I'll come over. I'll knock on the door.
Last question, if I may.
Derek, being a relatively new heart transplant, can you talk to us about your experience with congestive heart failure, being restricted to 64 fluid ounces intake, and then going through this metamorphosis, if you will, and then all of a sudden, you know, losing weight and dealing with prednisone and then gaining weight? How did the meds affect you? How long did it take you to level off and, you know, rise above all of the ups and downs of, you know, because it's tough to go from being conditioned to watching your fluid intake, watching your sodium, to then being told you're not drinking enough, or
Right.
you need, don't worry about the salt, or don't worry about this, and finding the balance between not having enough magnesium and cramping up in the hands and everything, and then
Yeah.
trying to do exercise, and, you know, how long does it take to level off, and what did the meds do for you?
And again, you're how far out again?
It'll be 5 months.
That's it, okay, put it in
Yes,
perspective.
right, exactly. Very good question. And it's funny. Perspective is a funny thing post-transplant. Yes, I told you I went from 200 pounds at cancer diagnosis to 155 pounds at transplant. In the months following, you know, I continued to atrophy until I was 128 pounds. Skin and bone. I could literally do this around my quads. Playing high school soccer, you know, I used to have like some fairly good-sized quads, and I completely atrophied all of that. And the fat that I had was gone. It's slow and incremental in that first year. And that whole first year was figuring out what was going on with my body, and the transplant team figuring out where my med levels needed to be, you know, and tests, and writing that out. It was difficult it was extremely difficult until I got my prednisone levels down to the point where the diabetes wasn't such an issue. And they were able to lift some of the diabetic restrictions of my diet. And I could, you know, eat a little more. And once I found that I could eat more, then it was a matter of, okay, well, if I exercise this much and burn this many calories, I can eat this much more. And it also worked well for the diabetes, the blood sugar levels. Until ultimately 3 months out, I kicked the diabetes, and I didn't have to take the insulin injections and everything like that. But at the end of that first year, you know, I took that sigh of relief, and I felt relatively phenomenal compared to where I was when I got the transplant, just before the transplant. I said, this is spectacular. And then at 2 years, I looked back at 1 year, and I said, that guy was an idiot. I feel phenomenal at 2 years. And I did the same thing at 3 years, and I did the same thing at 4 years. And now as I'm approaching 5 years in January, I should be in that row. As I'm approaching 5 years, you know, it's just beyond. It's mind-blowing, and I think what it does give you is a level of perspective. Remember where you are now, and use that as your baseline. Try and push yourself within the guidelines of the transplant team a little more every day. Remember where you were and celebrate where you're going, because it's going to get better. It's going to get a lot better.
I think that's going to be one of the key things. I'm going to have to cut it off because, Deb, what time is lunch served?
About 2-3 minutes.
That's what I was afraid of, okay. So we're going to cut it short at this point. Certainly you can ask him questions later, but that celebrating every day is key. And so it's a thank you. Inspiration 365 Days a Year by Zig Ziglar. Like you need this like a hole in the head, right? You will find some of these books out in the clinic area. Same one of this. As we've said before, Second Chance puts them out there all the time. Take them home, enjoy them. If you get through with it, don't put it on the shelf and forget it. Bring it back in, and if you have a chance, put a note in there. So the next person picking up that book will be connected to you in some way. Derek, thank you very much. It's amazing. This is all because we have the teams we have behind us helping accomplish that day-to-day celebration, right? And friendships, the network we have, reach out. I was going to ask you, what's, of all of the experiences from beginning to end, what's the highest point so far? What one wouldn't you trade for anything?
Being in the delivery room.
That's what I was expecting you to say, and
Yeah.
Beautiful.
there's that one, the end of the trip, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Derek.
Thank you.